Hi, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 5th Annual Community Wealth Building Summit, the first that we've been able to have in person since May 2019. And it's so brilliant to have everyone here in person in this wonderful library. A library, a real symbol of what investment in public infrastructure looks like. And you have to say to yourself, if this library was being built and planned now, would it actually ever happen? So, public services, public infrastructure like this library are here to be treasured. So it's wonderful to be here today. And where better to be than in Birmingham? And before I go on to talk about the challenges and the situation that we find ourselves in at the current time, I just wanted to pay tribute to Birmingham, our hosts today, for helping us to make today possible. And also to our partners, Power to Change, the Barrow Cadbury Trust, and the Democracy Collaborative, who have all been stalwart supporters of community wealth building throughout the years, both in the UK and beyond. And I also want to thank the CLES team for all the hard work that they've put into putting today together. A fantastic bunch of people that I have the privilege to work with every day, and hopefully you'll get the chance to meet over the course of today as well. But I also want to thank all of you from coming, not just from Birmingham, but from all four corners of the UK. We've got people here from the Isle of Wight, who we've been really privileged to have had the chance to work with this year on their community wealth building plan. I'd also like to say a massive Céad Míle Bhailte to all the people who have come over the Irish Sea from Northern Ireland. Well, I'm sure you're here, yeah. Normally Northern Ireland people are a lot more noisy than that. So, but fantastic to have you here, and thank you for making the journey. And it's been brilliant to see the Community Wealth Building Ministerial Panel that published its report just a few weeks ago, helping to embed community wealth building at the heart of government in Northern Ireland. Well, hopefully when we get a government back up and running. I'd also like to do a big shout out to everyone from Scotland. We've got people here from Argyll and Bute, from Argyll and Bute, from the Scottish Borders, from Ayrshire, and from the Scottish Government. And last year at our summit, we were privileged to have Mr. Tom Arthur, the first government minister in the world, actually, to have community wealth building as part of his portfolio. And it's fantastic as we look forward to the publication of a new community wealth building bill to be published early next year. And we've also got friends from across England and Wales, from Oldham, no, maybe not here yet, maybe on the train. We've got people from our home city in Manchester. We've got people from Preston. Any Preston, Manchesters here? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. We've got people here, where else? From Cumberland, and from North Yorkshire. So from across the UK, people have come, and also from Wales as well. We've got Aine here from Wales. And 2022 was the first year that we published a report in Welsh, which was a really great milestone for us at CLES as well. Thank you for coming. You're all innovators. You're all entrepreneurs, willful individuals, activists, not prepared to accept the limitations of our current economic model, but working with your partners, your colleagues, to build a different future. And I'm also delighted that we're joined today by my predecessor, Neil McEnroy, who's done so much to advance the cause of community wealth building in the UK and beyond. So many places are taking community wealth building forward, and it's truly joyful to have you here with us today. The last time we were here in Birmingham, back in 2018, community wealth building was relatively new, and how things have moved on. That said, there are still people here today and throughout the UK that are at the start of their community wealth building journey. And my colleagues, Victoria Bettany, Charlie Murphy, and Lauren Bond, have been doing some brilliant work this week, doing a series of sessions, bringing people up to speed with the fundamentals, and helping people to start their community wealth building journey. And they have just published, Victoria Bradford has just published a new blog, which is 5 practical things that you can do to get your community wealth building journey started. And that's on our website now, so really encourage you to take a look at that. Because if ever there was a time that we needed inspiration, case studies, ideas, it is now, because the context, it is grim. And in the short term, the emphasis will be on just trying to survive this crisis. And as we heard yesterday in the autumn statement, the government have made the choice not to invest in local economies, and instead we're facing a new era of austerity. I can hardly believe I'm saying that. £30 billion worth of cuts, 42 billion if you take into account inflation, and local authorities, many of which are already facing the biggest deficits in their history, will not get the help they will need, and instead are being told to raise council tax. In the midst of historic falls in living standards, Westminster are passing the buck. Community wealth building is starting to help people through this crisis, and lots of good examples of where that's taking place. But we in the community wealth building movement want to do more than simply survive. Our movement is about long-term change, a new economic model where the wealth we already have flows easily into communities, local economies which deliver good lives, not just GDP, and work for the survival of our planet. That's the world that we all want to build. And to build it, we need to reflect and learn on what's happened over the last 20 years. Because something's not going right. For too long, the standard economic approach has been, if we build it, they will come. If you get the inward investment, if you raise the land values, if you get the new people in, then the benefits will follow in its wake. And this is the same assumption that the government are now putting forward too. Push for growth at any cost, and eventually the benefits will trickle down. But as our analysis that we're going to publish later today shows, there is no automaticity about growth. And even when we've had inward investment, that hasn't automatically led to better lives for people, to any reductions in disadvantage. Growing the pie doesn't necessarily mean that more people get a slice, because the thing is, bigger pies mean bigger appetites. So you have to up the game to get a rate of growth that not only sustains the appetites of the wealthiest, but allows a few crumbs to fall from the table to help everyone else in the country. And that's why we need to learn and use that learning to redesign. Because in an era of crises, and I think we're in that now, the traditional approaches will no longer suffice. We need to be fleet of foot, willing to work collaboratively, brave enough to see past the agendas, past the egos, past the institutional bureaucracy that can hold back innovation and change, and with the ability to reimagine, to redesign, and deliver, fundamentally, a different type of economy for our local areas. We've all had enough of top-down extractive economics. The planet has had enough, frankly, but we're also fed up with the top-down extractive economic policy, which sees the consequences of political decisions at Westminster being blamed on local people and places across the UK, with devolved and local government left to pick up the pieces. The Chancellor says he does not want to leave a legacy of debt, but in failing to invest, the government will also leave a legacy of disinvestment in the very infrastructure upon which decent economies are built. Early years, childcare, further education, access to good quality housing, the list goes on. But ultimately, this is about asking ourselves, what kind of economy do we want to build for the future of our places? What kind of future for our children? Who should benefit from the wealth that already exists, and how to bring that wealth and growth home to the communities who need it most? And that's what you're all working for in your communities, and that is what community wealth building is all about. Not waiting for the dawn of a new era, but building that era, building that new economy, one place, one community at a time, because local action is national change. So thank you again for being here today in person. We're really pleased with the programme that we've been able to put together for you. We know it's not easy to take time out of what is a really difficult set of circumstances. We hope that you find today nourishing, sustaining, and inspiring and helpful for you in the work when you head back on Monday. In a minute, I'll be handing over to our friends at the Birmingham Anchor Network, one of my favourite projects that we have the chance to work on at CLES. And they'll be telling us about the progress that they've been making here in Birmingham. And then following that, we're delighted to have our keynote speaker, Imandeep Kaur, who will share some of her reflections as a key activist for citizen engagement in radical economic change. After Emmy, I will hand over the reins to CLES's new chair, Carolyn Wilkins, who many of you will know from Oldham. And she's going to chair a panel of place leaders who will reflect on Emmy's remarks. The panel will wrap up this plenary session, and you'll have a chance to go and get a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. And then we'll go into our breakout sessions, where you'll have a chance for a little bit more of an intimate conversation about the challenges we face and some of the solutions from across the UK. And then we'll have our lunch. Then we'll have another series of breakouts, what we've called our fireside chats. And believe you me, we're taking that quite literally. So bring your fire extinguishers. And then finally, we'll meet back here for our closing session, where my colleague Tom Lloyd Goodwin, where's Tom? There he is. He will talk us through the findings of a new report that we've published today, A Light in the Dark. But bringing it back to the here and now, as I said, we're delighted to be here in Birmingham, a city which has showcased the Commonwealth Games here this year. And I'm delighted to welcome Councillor Ian Ward, the leader of Birmingham, our hosts, to share a few thoughts on Birmingham's journey on community wealth building. So over to you, Ian. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for taking the time to join us here today for the 2022 Community Wealth Building Summit. I'd like to talk to you this morning about inclusive growth and our approach to genuinely levelling up for the people and the communities of Birmingham. Because if we're going to deliver prosperity and opportunity for all, then our people and places must be at the heart of everything that we do. Indeed, our Levelling Up strategy, which we launched in November of last year, makes clear that our inclusive growth approach, with community wealth building at its heart, seeks to ensure that the strengths of a growing economy reach every corner of the city and that the wealth is retained within our communities. And why is this so important? Well, because despite being a city that is very much on the up, a bold city being transformed by projects like the £1.9 billion Smithfield development, which is adjacent to the Bullring here in the city centre, is the largest mixed-use development site in the whole of Europe. And the £700 million Paradise development, which is a short walk away from where we are this morning, that has delivered not only grade A office space that's now attracting businesses into the city, but also world-class public realm that is helping to drive more investment. In addition to those things, this is also a city of urgent challenges. There is a 10-year gap in life expectancy between the poorest and most affluent areas in the city. Fuel poverty impacts on nearly 22% of the population and is clearly set to increase. Unemployment in this city is more than double the national average. And over 40% of Birmingham's children grow up in relative poverty. Almost half the children and young people in this city, in a first world economy, are growing up in relative poverty. If there's one thing that the City Council, the business community and other partners in Birmingham should seek to change, it is that statistic. Our success will be measured not by shiny new buildings, but by how we use the investment, the regeneration and major projects to address those challenges and to genuinely transform the lives of our people. Which is why supporting inclusive growth is the Council's #1 priority. So we're using procurement to support local employment and drive social value via the Anchor Network, our business charter for social responsibility, and we're embedding social value in our major projects to ensure that success for Birmingham means success for the people and the communities of Birmingham. So if you take this summer's Commonwealth Games as an example, the Games were a huge success, and not just in sporting terms. The benefits included an investment package of almost £1 billion for new homes, better public transport and upgraded infrastructure. The Games are also on track to deliver almost 900 jobs, 105 apprenticeships and £243 million of social value, meaning the biggest winners from Birmingham 2022 were the businesses, people and communities of the city region. And you don't need to just take my word for it. The way we hardwired social value into our delivery of such a major project has been cited as an exemplar in the government's Levelling Up white paper. So what next? Well, we must create more jobs, and I mean by that good, well-paid jobs. We're already a living wage city, and we're actively seeking to improve rates of pay with more businesses headquartered here in Birmingham. We're determined to equip our citizens for those jobs that we are creating, and in order to do that, we must bridge the skills gap, increase apprenticeships, and provide more advice on pathways to employment. We will increase our focus on community building and market making, developing community assets and using council and community assets to support social enterprises, cooperatives and local SMEs. To that end, the Council has joined partners calling for a national community wealth fund from dormant assets to invest in our communities. And we're working with Birmingham MPs, the West Midlands Combined Authority and our neighbours in Solihull to develop a whole place approach to East Birmingham, building on the city's East Birmingham inclusive growth strategy and making a big ask of national government through the devolution process. East Birmingham has a population of over 250,000 people. It is a city within a city, effectively, and it has some of the highest levels of deprivation in the city of Birmingham. So making a change for the communities that live in East Birmingham is an important priority for the council. And our message to government is simple. Give us the tools and the investment, and we will deliver truly inclusive, transformational growth and employment at pace and scale. We have shown through the Commonwealth Games, the Birmingham Anchor Network and our Business Charter for Social Responsibility that putting our people, partners and communities at the heart of everything we do is the right way forward. Now we must work with partners from the grassroots up to ensure that community wealth building becomes part of our collective DNA. If we can do that, then we'll finally deliver the holy grail of inclusive growth and levelling up and truly benefit all of our communities right across Birmingham. Good luck with your discussions today, and thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ian. And that point about trust, trusting local government, trusting local organisations to get on with the job. If ever there was a message we need it at this time, it is that. Now, one of the reasons we chose Birmingham for the summit this year was in recognition of the work that's happened in the city because of the Birmingham Anchor Network. And the network's been immensely valuable, not just, as our next speakers will tell you, in developing a pioneer collective solution to some of the challenges that Aine just spoken about, but in providing a breathing, living case study for other places as to how networks of institutions can work together to create change, to kind of push past the barriers and build something which is bigger than the sum of its parts. So I'm now going to hand over to Tim and Simon and Mark to tell us some of their quick thoughts and reflections on what the Anchor Partnership has achieved this year. So I'm going to throw the microphone. This is going to be interesting. Oh, good, it's not too far. Simon, here you go.
I get to cuddle the microphone. This is the first. It's a little comfort blanket for me. Thank you, Sarah. So I'm Simon Wilson. I'm Chief Exec at the Pioneer Group. So we're a housing association here in North East Birmingham. 96% of the homes, the 2,500 homes we manage, is on a single estate, Castle Vale. And in preparing for today, we were talking to my colleague Tim, who you'll hear from in a moment. I think we worked out that Tim's organisation is about 100 times bigger than my organisation in terms of spending power, number of employees. But as we know, size isn't everything. What we lack in scale, we make up for in community focus. So over the last nearly 25 years, I think we can make a strong case for being an anchor organisation. We don't just provide good quality housing and services, but we play a crucial role in sustaining the regeneration of Castle Vale, improving the lives of our tenants and residents, and a kind of ceaseless focus on turning around and improving deep-rooted inequalities in our communities. Through our Charity Compass support and our partnerships team, we provide a range of people-based services from employment and skills to family support to youth work. I also find myself managing a football stadium, one of 3 community asset transfers on Castle Vale, which also sees the library and the swimming pool run by local groups. We've always known we can achieve the outcomes we strive for through partnership, and we've always been keen as that being at the centre of our success. The membership, therefore, of the Birmingham Anchor Network has provided us with a real chance to connect our residents to the wider wealth and opportunities often concentrated in other parts of this great city. Most importantly, we've turned our aspiration into action. It has not been a talking shop. We've helped connect the citizens of Birmingham to employment opportunities they would otherwise not have had, resulting in an innovative and highly successful partnership with UHB, helping over 300 people into work. I'm incredibly proud of the work we've done together and excited and ambitious to turn this network into a long-term driver of community wealth building. I'm going to give myself a challenge.
Thank you. I think it's the first time my rugby skills have been challenged in a conference. Thank you, Sonia. Yes, we are the monster. The NHS, 22,000 employees, £2 billion of revenue per year that we spend, a massive impact on the local economy. And as those of you who've worked with the NHS will know, we're very warm and cuddly and very easy to work with. I wish. And where we have real problems is getting local traction. And by linking to organisations like Pioneer, it actually allows us to get to the community we need to get to. And through a trusted organisation, it means that the young people we're trying to assist who trust Pioneer and trust them that we're working with them will actually benefit them. And that local traction has had a massive impact. And as Simon mentioned, the ICANN programme around youth employment, which are working in our most deprived areas. And over 1,800 young people have been contacted through the ICANN programme. 1,000 have engaged, which is huge for us, actually, getting that level of engagement locally. And we've got nearly 300 people now into after 6 months. And that is a massive change. That changes the attitude of our managers, because in the past they would say, well, they come, they go, they never stay. But now we're doing it in such a joined-up way that we are creating long-term opportunities. And these are not just entry-level jobs. We are looking then taking these members of our teams forward with long-term careers. Of course, that gives us another benefit, because not only does it fill our workforce gap, it's creating a healthier community around us. These are the populations we serve. And that then leads us on to the value of the anchor and how we can then move on to working with places like Aston. We can look to how we procure from local companies and the job that they're doing to try and work out how the NHS procurement rules can work to allow us to buy locally is magical. And at that point, I'll hand over.
Wasn't such a big throw, thank you very much. Wasn't such a big throw, but it's great that a Welshman is passing the ball to an Englishman. I hope that happens on Tuesday next week. I'm Mark Smith. I'm Exec Director of Business and Regional Engagement at Aston University, and I'm a proud member of the Birmingham Anchor Network. I'm here with my colleagues today, Angela and Hannah from the university, who will be here all day to talk about our work. To give you some context, Aston University, if you view it as a business, it's a £200 million business with approximately 14,000 students. It's 69% people who have Asian heritage in terms of the university, and 40% of those people come from households that have not previously been to university. Is it easy to get in? No, 3 Bs or above. So not an easy task to get into Aston University, but we are helping people move forward in their lives. It's a technical university, so we do a limited range of things. We do business, we do engineering and physical sciences, and we do health and life sciences, and that's it. Other stuff is done well by other universities, including also, obviously, the city's first ever civic university, the University of Birmingham, who are one of our partners in the Anchor Network. What's been good about the Anchor Network for us? As I've said, we do reach out to people in a wide range of communities across the West Midlands and beyond, but it's raised our gaze even further. So we've always looked after our staff. Now we're looking after the staff of our suppliers. We've always looked after our students. Now we're going beyond the inner ring road and looking at the lives and the mortality of people in the rest of Birmingham to make sure we can use the university's resources. We're making sure we are paying the real living wage and requiring our suppliers to pay the real living wage as well. And most importantly, we're the driver around the procurement changes. So we're looking to make sure that people use the power of buying to change people's lives. I guess most importantly, Sarah, this isn't a 1 or 2 or 3 year shot. This is a long-term goal. So we're happy to work with the Anchor Network and commit, I think, to an 8-year agreement to go forward. This isn't overnight. This is going to be a long time. Now, I'm getting the 1-minute warning from the back, so I'm going to throw this back to Sarah from here. So, are you ready?
Hey. Brilliant. Thanks so much. Thank God I caught that. Would have let the whole of Ireland down if I'd let that fall. So thanks so much for that. And, you know, the Anchor partnership is such an important part. It's such an important symbol of what you can do collectively. If you push past the barriers that often surround us as organisations, and you collapse them in the mission of something that's greater than yourself. And I'm delighted that the Anchor partnership have given that commitment for a further 8 years. And also want to pay tribute to Conrad Park, the Birmingham Anchor Network coordinator, who is one of our team at CLES and has done huge amounts of work to bring the Anchor partnership to where it is today. So now, from the institutional to the personal, and I'm delighted to be handing over to our keynote speaker for this morning, Imandeep Kaur, the founder and director of CIVIC SQUARE. And throughout her decade-long career, Imandeep has focused on convening and building community, the role of citizens in a radical systemic change. And how do we create more democratic, distributed, open source, social and civic infrastructure? She co-founded CIVIC SQUARE, a public square neighbourhood lab and a creative participatory platform based on regenerative civic and social infrastructure within neighbourhoods. And she's also part of the Donut Economics Action Lab advisory team. And today, she's going to share with us her reflections on the journey that she's been on with CIVIC SQUARE and her take on the challenges that we now all face. So delighted to have her with her. Please give her a big welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for this invitation. I actually feel really more nervous than I normally do at all. And I was trying to unpick this morning why I feel that. And I think it is really because of the scale of responsibility rooms like this have on our hands. And I think Sarah did such a powerful and honest opening in the true style of CLES. I'm looking at Neil. A real slice through the reality of where we're at. And, you know, I'm not here to say that I've got all the answers. I'm just going to share a little bit of the work that we've done. And just to really quickly say that what CIVIC SQUARE is really interested in the neighbourhood infrastructure that we require for climate transition. And what do we mean by that? We started off as a demonstrator experimental project in the centre of Birmingham where we built the Impact Hub. We crowdfunded it, we co-owned it, and we wanted to start to see what happened when people were connected really honestly to the deep systemic challenges we face, from the redesign of the land contract to the 20th century economic system that would need to transform in the 21st century, to issues of climate and social justice. And we started to bring people together. We started to make sure that we could really connect them deeply to the scale of the challenge and see where their lived and learned experience and creativity and participation and connection could take us. And overall, if any of you were ever there, I saw over and over and over again over 5 years, that There was no lack of ideas, no lack of collaboration, no lack of deep understanding of the scale of transformation we were going to require. Of course, people didn't have all the resources, all of the time, all of the space and access to land and spaces to be able to deal with the issues they were coming across or redesigning around. But there certainly wasn't any lack of knowledge. There wasn't this idea that you leave the community to sweep up the snow and pick up litter. Not that there's anything wrong with that very important, noble, dignified work. Please make sure you carry on doing it in your communities. But this idea that, like, we'll leave the serious people somewhere, you know, in a room somewhere, dealing with those big challenges, and communities can do that kind of palliative care whilst the planet slowly declines and our existence on it does. But we saw the absolute opposite. We saw people from all backgrounds, all ages, lots of different types of communities coming together continuously, not only practically in the everyday, providing mutual aid and support and creativity, but actually reimagining their worlds. And you know, I can see one of the members here, from reimagining land contracts to reimagining the economic system to understanding the scale of challenge. This was all over the place. And so we went on a journey to move towards a neighbourhood in Birmingham called Ladywood, very similar to the ones that many of us had grown up in. I grew up in East Birmingham, in Stetchford, and the really key moment that I understood when I was 5 years old, for any of you who are Brummies, was when the Stetchford Cascades opened. It was this amazing swimming pool at the end of my road, £1 to go swimming, these mad slides on the outside. And I lived in inner city Birmingham. Parents of immigrants had moved here. We didn't have much money. But when that Stetchford Cascades opened, I felt like Disneyland had opened down the road. It was like all of my friends, all of my cousins who were from London, and were like, Birmingham's a bit shit, isn't it? We've got to go and stay with the Birmingham cousins. When Stetchford Cascades opened, this was the greatest place ever. And so very, very early on, I understood quite deeply the transformational impact that social infrastructure can have on the access to tools, to imagination, to space, to creativity, to community. And I was really convinced that when we bring the ideas of big systemic challenges and social infrastructure together, what we need to do is give the tools, the resources, the space, the platforms back to people to lead their climate transition. And over the last, and I'll explain a little bit more of that before I close up, but over the last 3 years, we've been really working on being rooted in the heart of Ladywood. And we have gone deep. We have opened up ideas of donor economics, which I'll share a bit more about later, the challenge of retrofit, the issue of the climate crisis, the social and ecological crisis, up in 101 creative ways. We've been in the streets, in the local community centres, we've been unpacking these ideas. We've been looking at the scale of the challenge of retrofit. We've been looking at what happens when we connect our school playgrounds, our empty sites, our corner fields that have of green space to growing spaces. We've been looking at what happens when we introduce the ideas of planetary and social justice in local schools. We've been working on understanding what it means to retrofit a street, to really look at the deep retrofit. When people talk about there's no demand, well, there probably isn't loads of demand for wall insulation, where someone knocks on your door and posts something in and says, fancy insulating your walls. But actually, you'll see in Balsall Heath, which is also doing incredible work on retrofit, we've got hundreds of people that understand the opportunity to deeply retrofit our streets, to create warmer, safer, healthier homes, where the air is cleaner, where less space is given over to cars, where more of us can understand the impact of the oncoming climate crisis. And what we've been doing is just literally going to the street, setting up in the middle of the road, putting a few bikes round. I mean, I might get in trouble for this because I'm sure I'm meant to do an official road closure. To really unpack what happens with all the assets we've already got there, the back garden space, the front garden space, the potential of retrofit, and really looking at these ideas with people. And all over, and I can tell you over and over again, every day, the energy, commitment, excitement, passion country with 125 peer learners in their neighbourhoods, in their streets, reimagining, unpacking these ideas of this 20th century system that is just not going to be fit for purpose. And all over the place, people were getting out into their places, into their school playgrounds, into trips, into repurposing their empty warehouses to bring people together. And why do I think this is really important? I'm just going to skip because I'm going a bit over time. Why do I think this is really important? Well, this is a piece of work that we did over the last 3 years across neighbours, children, schools, imagination activists, data scientists, researchers, and that is the picture of the Ladywood Donut. And what that means is that those red wedges are how far we're overshooting planetary boundaries. And those red wedges on the inside is how short we're falling on meeting people's social needs. I'm sharing this because unless we are honest about the fundamental reimagination of our lives that is required, we are going to keep doing things that are not going to get us anywhere close to that safe and just space in the middle. This challenge repeats everywhere, and I wanted to share this because I wanted people to really think about this today. When we talk about challenges like this, here's one example. We're doing loads of different work, and I haven't really got time to tell you all about it. But when you look at a challenge like this, currently what we've done is continue with normal market logics on this. We will continue building entities, businesses. We won't worry too much if their governance is extractive. We won't really worry too much where their profit is going. We won't really worry if they've even analysed whether we've got the material and carbon budget to not do this. And when you look at challenges like retrofit, when you start to look at how much work we need to do, we don't have the carbon or material budget. So we can keep talking about this, but we are going to need fundamental reimagination. We are going to have to use natural materials. We are going to have to put microfactories in our local neighbourhoods. We are going to have to completely unlock a civic retrofit sector, for example, in a way that looks nothing like the 20th century models of business. Because all we're going to do is keep adding to this. And we know the challenge of this generation is not just to meet the needs of all people. We have to meet the needs of all people and get them thriving within the means of the living planet, as Kate Raworth would say. So it doesn't matter if we retrofit all of our homes in the next 10 years and completely blow out the planetary boundaries, because we cannot live with that. It will not work. You don't need me to keep telling you about that. But then when people tell you, can we afford this? Well, here's an example of what underperforming housing does at a health level, at an individual level, at social inequality, economic inequality, crime and safety, public health, air quality, and so on. In the next layer, you can see all the people in Birmingham City Council who pay for us not investing in that. In the third layer, you see all the people in central government that pay for us not investing in that. This is an accounting challenge, because these are all future liabilities that we pass on to some next generation that will have to pay for it anyway. But we're saying now we can't afford this. And so it's really, really important for us to think about, even when we're thinking about challenges like retrofit today, they are complex, they are knotty, but it isn't just a social challenge. Unless we understand that we need to really fundamentally redesign our local institutions, our local spaces, unlock civic capacity, we will keep going round and round in circles and not understanding the devastating ecological impact we're having. And as we know yesterday with the austerity announcements, and as we know from much of what's happening at COP27, we cannot afford, we have this liminal space, this privilege, all of us, to not hit those social and ecological tipping points of which there's no way back. And we have to have these stories in the room when we're discussing a lot of this. And to finish off, I just want to say that for us, in questions like this, we're asking, what does a civic retrofit sector look like? What does it look like to unlock the civic imaginations and capacities locally? What does it mean to unlock the co-benefits in a place and understand the wider pieces that happen when we start to invest? And why does this matter? Well, I'll leave you with this. And skip out those couple of other slides, because I want to say something really important to us, and I hate the imperial example because there is lots of problematic things with what I'm about to say, but to close, we have to believe and understand that we've done scales of transitions like this in the past. If you look at an idea like post-war Britain, we were sick, we were unhealthy, no prime minister from the front could go and say, can you guys all go and get healthy? And you're all sitting around going, like, what? Whatever we believe the reasons for that was, whether it was to increase GDP or whether people believed there was a moral, democratic access to health, even when we did the transition from a more industrial to a more technical economy. You didn't have a prime minister at the front saying, could you just all go and get smarter, please, like really quickly, preferably in like a month's time. It's not what happened. Well, number one, communication didn't work like that back then. We understood we needed large-scale societal transformation. When we built the NHS, we built the national health system, we built the regional health system, and then fundamentally, we built the last piece of the puzzle. We built the neighbourhood GPs. Just like we built the community libraries. Why? Because you have to provide democratic access to the tools, the knowledge, the spaces, the ideas to the people for them to transition. And the work here in the Community Wealth Network really understands that in terms of what we need to be unlocking. But we need the equivalent of societal infrastructure that is like the neighbourhood GP for the climate transition. The micro-factories for retrofit, the access to knowledge, the access to space, the access to the tools to biodiversify, to clean up our air, to grow food locally, to clean up our streets, to create more 21st century models of sharing, of connecting, of playing, of imagining. They have to be at a few minutes away from where you are. We cannot do this just by a government going to COP. I mean, we aren't going to do it with this government going anywhere, but we can't just do it at that top level. We absolutely have to understand that it's not just a moral thing to involve communities or make sure a bit of something trickles down to them. We practically cannot transition unless over the next 10 to 15 years, there is a revolution. And these ideas are everywhere. I can see them, I can see Birmingham Settlement in the room. The future is not some distant outpost. It's already here. Everywhere we look in the Birmingham Anchor Network, in places like Birmingham Settlement, in the work of Northfield that I can see in the room, these ideas are already there. The communities are already there. The imagination is already there. The empty spaces are already there. The school playgrounds, the streets that could be retrofitted. These things are already there, but we have to understand the scale of this transition. What we're trying to do in Birmingham is transform this 20th century industrial infrastructure that was responsible for quite an extractive approach to Britain and Birmingham thriving in the Industrial Revolution to a more regenerative 21st century platform that has access to community kitchens, to spaces to share, to learn, to microfactories for communities to build their own homes, to rewild their land, to retrofit their streets. We're really interested in showing a demonstrator of what it means to build those neighbourhood GPs, but you don't need 100,000 square foot to do that. Our GPs, our school playgrounds, our empty high street shops, our libraries that are closing all over the place, these all have to start to become the access point to the knowledge, to the wealth, to the resources, to the inspiration, to the imagination, to things like this in every community, in every street, if we have any chance of meeting the challenge. And I really do want you to hold those red wedges in your head when we talk about this, because it is, of course, fundamental that we meet people's social needs and we build thriving, imaginative communities. But please, 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 let's have an honest conversation today of how far we are off. And in this conversation, planetary and so ecological-wise, and in this conversation, I haven't even started to mention our impact on the global south, our global responsibilities. I haven't even started that conversation. There's plenty of people in the room, particularly I can see Leon from Breathe in the corner that you can talk about. But we really need to make sure that we are holding that ecological, planetary and our global responsibility when we're starting to talk about our social needs here. And when we can hold that story together, I do believe, as always, human ingenuity, care, our pro-social tendencies will be able to rise to the level of the transition and revolution we need. But you have to believe in your hearts that that's the scale that we need. Because if we don't, we will just leave things a little bit probably worse for the next generation, and they'll have to pick it all up again. And perhaps that won't even be an option. So I want to say that I think the hope, the imagination, the creativity is everywhere. It's everywhere you look. But we need to be able to live it and breathe it, and we need to make sure that the planet, at ecological tipping points, the scale of the challenge and the scale of the reimagination is really in the room. Otherwise, we will continue to do 20th century ideas to tackle 21st century challenges whilst seeing the planet as collateral damage in that. We've got this lovely series called Reimagining Economic Possibilities on our Medium account. It's full of pioneers doing this work all over the place. Please feel free to go and have a look. And sorry I've taken a bit too much time. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Aine. That was so inspiring and so much in there for us to get our teeth into over the next few I was going to say few days, but don't worry, we're not here for the weekend. But for the next few hours today. And that diagram that Aine showed of the liabilities left by underperforming housing, that's really powerful in terms of just what we're leaving behind by failing to invest in our communities at this critical time. And also that really strong message from Aine about, remember those red wedges, because community wealth building is about building a new local economy for places, but it's also building that for the planet, because that's what the planet needs. If our planet's to survive, it needs a new economic model, and one that supports and nurtures it so that we have it for future generations. So we've now got the opportunity to reflect on what Aine said and many of those powerful messages. And so I'm going to invite our panel to come forward. And I'm delighted that the panel is going to be chaired by our CLES's new chair, Carolyn Wilkins, who many of you will know from Oldham. And we're also joined on the panel by John, Matt, Aine and Sonia. Thanks so much for being with us, and I'm going to hand over to Carolyn to kick us off. So give them a big hand.
Oh dear. Right, I don't quite know what to do with that just at the moment. Right, morning everybody. Fabulous start. Thank you, Aine. Thank you, Sarah, for starting us off with such energy, hope, but really severe challenges that we're all facing. So I'm delighted to be joined by the panel who I suggest actually it's easier if you introduce yourselves before you do your kind of reflection on what you've heard so far this morning, just so that we make best use of the time. Shall I start at the far end with Aine?
Okay. Hi everybody, my name's Aine Gawthorpe. I'm Deputy Director of Foundational Economy at Welsh Government. And while I don't have community wealth building kind of in the title, it is very much a part of the policy and approach that we've got around foundational economy in Welsh Government. I mean, I heard some really, really powerful and inspirational stuff this morning. I mean, the stuff that Aine was talking about in the local communities is absolutely at the heart of what we do. And we really don't underestimate the challenges. I think we're fortunate in Wales. I think at the moment we're unique in having legislation that embeds the well-being of future generations. So all of the decision-making and policy-making in Wales has to consider the well-being principles and the well-being of future generations. So we have that focus. But it's not easy. And I think in the current crisis, the energy crisis and the cost of living crisis, it is a threat and a risk to what we're trying to do. Within foundational economy, what we're trying to focus on three things is household livability, so people having enough money to be able to live decent lives and spend that money within local economies. We're talking about the resilience of our supply base being absolutely critical, local businesses and SMEs that are really at the heart of embedded in their local communities and keeping wealth circulating in those communities. And then the third piece, and I think this really resonates with what Aine particularly was talking about, is about living within planetary constraints and making sure that everything we're doing is considering that sustainability question. So that's where we're focusing, but what I'm really hoping to get today is inspirational ideas like we've heard about from the Birmingham Anchor Network, for example, and from the Aine's work within the communities that we can then try and translate and trickle down, because the foundational economy division is a small unit, but we're here to be the voice of foundational economy principles across Welsh Government and across the public sector. So taking those good ideas and really trying to feed them out and embed that right across the communities of Wales is what we're hoping for. So really excited to be here today, actually.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Brown, I'm leader of Preston City Council. I also do some work for the Democracy Collaborative to spread community wealth building in this country and beyond, obviously in conjunction with CLES and a number of others. Amazing presentation, Aine. I really liked it. I think what we have learnt in Preston is that this needs to have the community behind it. We need to educate community about alternatives and actually get them emotionally behind alternatives. And I think the crisis we're in and the system problem that we do have, that we've seen with the wealth of billionaires increase threefold in the last 10 years, which has been quite eloquently picked up by the Enough is Enough campaign, means that we need to do a lot of this from the grassroots upwards. So I think there's a movement now that's pretty unstoppable, how it's spreading in this country and beyond. And I think we've got to try and really wake people up and realise that there doesn't have to be these levels of misery, because the work in Preston was inspired by Cleveland, Ohio with Evergreen, which itself was inspired by the alternative economies of Spain, in Mondragon especially. And there are places, and they are few and far between, where they have found real solutions, where wealth and power are actually the ownership of communities. And that's where we've got to go, because the reality is in this country there's certain parts of it where you're lucky to get to 70. If you're very, very wealthy, you can often expect to live close to 90. And the reason for that is the fact that people are in poverty. And I say that every time. And, you know, it's a huge human rights abuse that poverty is leading to those levels of life expectancy. It's actually worse in many ways than being sent to prison. It was Professor Richard Wilkins that actually said that, who wrote The Spirit Levels. So, you know, we're part of a big movement, but I think we've all got a responsibility to come together and make something happen. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. I'm really thrilled to be here this morning, and I feel like I'm with my tribe, if that sets the tone. I'm Sonia Halliwell. I'm Director for Customer Transformation at Wigan Council, and I've had the privilege to be leading on community wealth building for the borough and be pulling together a wonderful anchor organisation to start that driving that forward. We recognise we really are at the beginning of our journey, and it was really interesting to hear some of Birmingham's thoughts in terms of how their journey is developing. I'll be really honest, I'm still digesting what's come out of yesterday. We certainly don't have the answers. But I do know from a local government perspective, you know, this is the tipping point, isn't it, in terms of what we're seeing. This is different than austerity. This is more unpredictable, more complex, more uncertainty. And quite honestly, you know, for us, certainly in Wigan, we've seen an increase in people in real dire need, and welfare increased tenfold over the last few months. So that's really scary facts, isn't it? And these are people who've not needed to seek help before. So to address this in the long term, I think we really do need to steer ourselves and think, where is our resilience? And I'm really clear on that. Our resilience over the last 2 or 3 years absolutely came from our communities. It wasn't overseas. It wasn't further away. It was businesses and communities doing what they knew their communities needed to survive. And that's where the answer sits for me. So setting conditions from local government is really important. I don't think it's doing to, it's absolutely doing with. And it's helping to lift all aspects of our community to find those solutions. So really thrilled that we can get into some of that nitty-gritty today.
Thank you.
Hi. The City Council's Cabinet Member for Social Justice, Community Safety and Equalities, all the easy stuff. You heard our leader speak earlier on about some of the challenges that we face in the city. The fact that, you know, whilst on one hand we're a city that is still, you know, receiving vast amounts of inward investment, is economically thriving on one measure, but on another we have enormous challenges. You know, literally a stone's throw from this building, 42% of children going up below the poverty line, 22% of households facing serious issues around fuel poverty now, some of the highest levels of unemployment in the country. Like you, I've sort of looked at what was happening yesterday and have a real nasty feeling of Groundhog Day. You know, austerity 2.0 appears to be descending upon us. Over the last 10 years, we lost 2/3 of our controllable budget in this city, and that has made tackling those challenges even more difficult. But as you've heard, we've also been quite innovative in terms of the work, particularly the Birmingham Anchor Network has done, in terms of driving the resources that we still have out into communities, building those opportunities and connecting those assets. I thought, you know, Imi made really pertinent and powerful points here about how broken our current economic model is and the scale of the change that we need to make, not just as a city, but as a wider country and society. I think there were 3 things that sort of come out for me. One is the importance of how we take an asset-based approach to this, and a community asset-based approach. So we're doing things with people and building bottom-up rather than imposing top-down. Our history is littered of examples of trying to do things to people to fix problems rather than working with them. And I think that's been one of the strengths of the community wealth building approach. The second thing, we've got to retain a focus on, and this is where I think austerity makes it very difficult, is ensuring that we're really focusing on tackling causes and early intervention and prevention of problems. Something we've tried to work very hard on in Birmingham, but of course, when resources are reducing and you've got statutory duties to meet as well, that balancing act becomes ever more difficult. And that, I think, is the big question that we've got to try and fix together, and we will only do it together.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thanks for all those reflections. As Sarah said, I spent over 30 years in local government. I'm now at the Birmingham Leadership Institute at the University of Birmingham. And actually what we're focusing on is how do we have the kind of leadership that we need to tackle these fundamental challenges that we're seeing globally, locally, because in the way that, speakers have said, we can't just keep repeating what we've been doing and hope that somehow it's going to be different. So we do need to fundamentally reimagine our leadership approaches. So I'm going to invite questions from the floor. Which means I'm going to have to throw this thing that I've got here. I'm not bad at throwing the ball for the dog, but other than that. So, and it might need a relay, because I'm not going to even attempt, if there's a question at the back of the room, to do this. So if so somebody in the front may be getting this, even if they're not asking a question, so you might regret sitting so near. Would anybody like to ask a question of the panel members? Go on, just so I can throw this. Oh, great. There we go. I can pass this, actually. And then... I'm going to, pass it on rather than throw it.
Hi, my name's Jagwan Johal from the Birmingham Race Impact Group. What comes to my mind is that we've been here before and we're likely to be here again. Community development and community wealth building are one of the same, and it's been around since post-war 1960s. There are various iterations, and it sometimes comes across as old wine rebottled. But the fundamental issue is that the basics are never got right. So what's the one thing that has happened before that needs to sort of change that will make the difference?
Thank you. Who would like to start with that one? What do you want to do with it? The one thing. John?
I mean, for me, the one thing that's happened before that doesn't need to happen again, it is about that top-down approach that's been taken to things. I can look at lots of examples. I mean, Jagran will know this as well as a Birmingham person. Lots of examples of where we've tried to fix some of our fundamental problems in the city, but it's been done in a top-down way. And that could have been through, well-resourced government programmes, stuff that we've done as a local authority in the past. But it doesn't kind of grow roots and stick and get sustainability. Whereas the examples of when things are done well, it's always bottom up. I think the work the Anchor Network does is a really good example of that. Connecting assets, connecting opportunities, connecting communities. That, I think, is the thing that we really need to get right if we're going to change things fundamentally.
Yeah, thank you. Sonia?
I completely agree with that, but I do have a massive worry bead, because what we didn't hear yesterday was any sense of how communities can be invested, will continue to be invested in. So we've got to be creative, and we've got to be capacity building. And I think that's beyond our communities, and I think it's looking broader in terms of our business communities and what we can do. And I think we've got a role to convene. The work that Amy's describing is about convening that conversation, convening that effort and pulling people together. That for me, if we ignore that, I think that will be a real detriment to everything that we need to set out to do. So I completely agree. It's got to be from the ground up.
Is there another question on the floor? Right.
Down here.
Down here. Oh, there we go. Sarah, go on. Love it. Go on. Oh, my God. Fully committed to that, Sarah, weren't you? Fully committed to that.
Really got me coffee there.
We might never see it again.
Hi, Cllr Ian Ward from the Chartered Institute of Building. I'm really interested in the fact that obviously communities find solidarity in the face of inequality and poverty, but with this whole localism approach and community wealth building, how do you get people to take a stake in their community without causing parochialism and exclusion of others as well?
Hold on to it for now. Yeah, we might be moving it again. Matthew?
Yeah, I think community wealth building's got to be completely diverse. If we're talking about groups are disadvantaged in the current economic system, it's often women, minority communities and the disabled. And I think community wealth building does offer many solutions to actually deal with those inequalities. So I think it's actually really working with communities. So in Preston, for example, we're working with refugees, minority communities about worker ownership, trying to educate them about that. food cooperatives. So if they can manage to collectively purchase, you can save money during the cost of living crisis. I think it's trying to really educate people that there are alternatives out there, and I think we need the institutional support but also the cultural awakening. I think that's really important. I think also we've just got to really hammer home to people that people have had it really hard in this country. We've had the imposition of the worst form of neoliberal economics since 1979. If that wasn't bad enough, we then had the 2007-8 financial crisis. From that, we've had austerity, we've had a hard Brexit, and now the worst public health crisis since World War II. And then if you put the autumn statement yesterday, it's been 40-odd years of abject misery. Now, the way I think we've got to really deal with that is to, in many ways, tear up the rule book and create our own. And I think trying to put these alternatives into communities and working with progressive councils, Labour-led, obviously in my case, I'm a Labour politician, and trying to build those alternatives in communities around alternative banking arrangements, alternative economic models, local procurement, local investment, looking at who actually owns the stuff in the local economy. I think that's the way forward, and then getting the community to actually support that, and trade unions, local businesses, voluntary sector as well, really. And that's the way that you do it, and waking everyone up, and then actually have that inclusivity that you need.
Thank you. I've had the time warning. Thank you very much, panel members. We could talk a lot more. I think what we've heard is that phrase, isn't it, the fierce urgency of now, and if not us, who? So actually those two kind of challenges taking forward into the rest of the day. I think I'm handing back to you now, Sarah, but thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much. And as Carolyn said, we could have talked all day about that. There's so much in what we've heard from Imme and from the panel this morning, and from our friends at the Birmingham Anchor Network. And thanks to all of you for what you've said, and for kind of, I think trying to realise that, we're not trying to pretend everything's okay. We're not trying to pretend that this is a bed of roses and everything's going to be okay the other side. But we are trying to convene today, to come together to say, well, how can we make sense of this in our own communities, in our own work, and how can we work together to get through this and ultimately come out the other side with a better future for the people that we work for and we care about, and that we live with on a daily basis. So, thanks again to all of you for coming, for everybody who's joined us online as well, and to all our speakers this morning. Can we give them a big, and yourselves, a really big round of applause? Welcome back, everybody. And I hope you all had a really good fireside chat, and you all had plenty of that lovely cake. And that you've all had really good conversations and a chance to meet loads of different people in the sessions that you were in. And thanks to all of you for coming along to the sessions, for sharing your ideas, for sharing your experiences, and hopefully getting as much back in return. It really only works because all of you are here and are willing to share those experiences and that knowledge with other people, regardless of where you are on the community wealth building journey. So this afternoon, we've got another really great session for you. And my colleague, Tom Lloyd Goodwin, is going to tell you about a new report that we've just published, which is called A Light in the Dark. And the report is now live on our website as well. And it's really a report about hope in difficult times. And it's really come from the voices of people like you across the UK who are working in local economies to try and make things better, and trying to sort of encapsulate the challenges that we face. And it's called Light in the Dark because it's about, hope for the future, and thinking about how local economic development can change and really evolve, and how we can use new ideas and new approaches from community wealth building to really make things better. But the phrase light in the dark reminds me of another phrase, which is all I know is a door into the dark, for which some of you will know is a poem by Seamus Heaney called The Forge, in which he describes that in the darkness of the forge, the blacksmith is creating. He's building something, and he's to beat real iron out and to work the bellows. And I guess that's what a lot of us do on a daily basis, perhaps not on a forge, but in a local hospital, in a local housing association, in a council, in a community organisation, beating real iron out and working the bellows. And he describes the unpredictable fantail of sparks which emerge from that heavy, hard work that all of us do on a regular basis. And I think there's something about that for all of us in the challenge of that, and how we kind of continue to forge a future despite the challenges and the sparks that can fly from that innovation, even in the midst of all the darkness and challenge that we face at the current time. So I'm delighted to hand over to Tom and our fantastic panel to hear a little bit more. So over to you, Tom.
And hello again, everyone, and good afternoon. What a day it's been. It's been so lovely. I just thought I'd reflect on that just to begin with. It's been so wonderful meeting so many of you who I only normally get to see on Zoom. So yeah, it's been brilliant, and I've loved all of the chats that we've had today. So yeah, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking through the findings of our. Oh God, there I am, looking like a travel writer. Talking through the findings of our new paper. I'm then going to bring in our stellar panel of international contributors via the power of Zoom, and they're going to offer their reflections before we get a bit of a discussion going. So this afternoon we're going to have Shana Cohen, who's the director of the Dublin-based think tank Task. We're going to have Andy Burnham, who is, of course, the mayor of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. We're going to have Sarah Breavington, who is the social strategy manager at the City of Sydney Municipal Authority. We've got Richard Watts, who's the Deputy Chief of Staff to the Mayor at the London Assembly. And we've got Dayna Cunningham, who's the Dean of the College of Civic Life at Tufts University in Massachusetts in the USA. So I'm going to do a bit. We'll get some reflections from the panel. I'll probably ask them some questions. Well, I will ask them some questions. And then I'm going to get this funny microphone and chuck it into the audience, and hopefully there'll be lots of wonderful questions from you all as well. So just let me kind of move into a bit of an introduction then to this new report that we've got out today. So a light in the dark, progressive frontiers in local economies. And I think I want to reiterate, I guess, what's been said at so many points during today, and that's really that it is a difficult time at the moment to be working in local government and in local economic development. We've got the worst cost of living crisis in a generation. We've got record levels of inflation. We've got spiraling levels of child poverty. We've got the environmental crisis, of course. We've got a labour market in huge flux. And we've also got the impact of 12 years of austerity on the capacity of local government and its partners to respond. Something that is going to get worse, of course, in light of the settlement that we saw yesterday. We heard it this morning from Westminster. The diagnosis, of course, as to how we fix this problem is this all we need is growth mantra. The reality, of course, what we've been talking about today is that we know in reality it's not so simple. We've had lots of growth over recent years. We've had lots of plans for growth, but we're still in the midst of crisis. And it's important to remember, actually, that we were in the midst of crisis, of course, even before we had COVID, and even before we've seen this kind of historic rise in inflation, the energy crisis, the cost of living crisis. These things were here before and present in our society well before that. So what our new report does then, in a nutshell, is it draws on the perspectives and the experiences of senior economic development practitioners across the UK who are really dealing firsthand with the challenges that we see out in our communities. And it really gets into examining, well, what's it like to have to try and weigh up your options when it comes to trying to generate new investment, generating jobs, opportunities for the benefit of people, for place and for planet. And I suppose our research throws up a number of insights, and there's three things I want to reflect on just before I talk about what some of the interventions are that we propose in our new research. So the first thing then to reflect on in terms of these insights is that I suppose local councils, like many of you here in the room today, really understand this notion that the all we need is growth rhetoric is too simplistic. You know, the fact that many at least have had those kind of positive statistics around growth, but also negative statistics around poverty, deprivation and inequality is deeply concerning to them. And everybody we spoke to within this report is trying to do something about it. So, you know, many are looking at kind of broader definitions of economic success that go beyond GDP growth. You know, everybody's talking about building more inclusive economies, creating a wider dashboard and indicators, a group of indicators of success. So not just GDP growth and productivity, but also statistics around reducing poverty, promoting living wage jobs, and responding to the climate emergency. The second insight is that what's a bit problematic here, and this is kind of like our key diagnosis, I suppose, is that the practical action that's being taken on the ground to try and build those more inclusive economies is based on the kind of traditional interventions that have arguably fueled or are fueling the very economic, social, and environmental problems that I mentioned at the outset. So, for example, many areas will say, well, we just need to get more out of inward investment. That will sort it. You know, we just need to squeeze them a bit harder, and that will create jobs and opportunities. But has that worked to date? Maybe a bit, yeah, it has worked, but also no, because to date, we've seen lots of inward investment over the last few years, but this hasn't started to dent those statistics around deprivation. And if you look on Twitter today, you'll see we've got a thread going which lays that out. It shows those increases in FDI, for example, across our city regions, but it also shows how that hasn't necessarily dented those statistics around deprivation. So in short, the inward investment-led approach has been unable to resolve the fact that actually low-paid, insecure jobs are a dominant feature of our mainstream economic model with detrimental consequences for worker health and well-being. And the risk, I suppose, is that in continuing to rely on inward investment, albeit with a bit more of a squeeze on those investors, will in practice offer little more than a veneer of something different. Now, this isn't to say that trying to get more out of inward investment isn't a good idea, but I think we have to question whether that should be the main thrust of an economic strategy in your typical area. And that's the kind of key point that we're making in the research. So, yes, okay, inward investment might be a necessity, but can we make room for another approach as well? The third key insight, just before I get to those interventions, is that it's Westminster, of course, that's kind of fueling this behaviour. So not only does Westminster continue to extol the virtues of a market liberal approach, since the 1970s, we have, of course, seen a steady drop-off in central government grants, which has escalated rapidly, of course, during the austerity period and looks to get worse over the next couple of years. And what this has done, of course, in a nutshell, is to create a very strong incentive for local councils to pursue and maintain this kind of more narrow focus of economic development that's about inward investment, as I say, but also property development-led regeneration. But, the really positive thing that we found in this report is that despite the challenges and in the midst of all this kind of crisis that we're facing at the moment, is that many areas are kind of starting to fight back against this tide. They're starting to focus on cultivating these place-based assets and really harnessing their power as anchor institutions to develop their economies from within. And although this is happening in a variety of ways, and we've been talking about a number of those ways throughout today's conference, we've kind of identified 5 key imperatives in this report that we think are key for building inclusive economies. So as I say, we've mentioned some of them, and these will be kind of familiar to some of you, but let me just kind of briefly outline what those are before we get some reflections from our panel. So first, it's about getting that vision right. It's this idea of minimizing the extraction of wealth, building prosperity for all, and making that the key tenet, really, of local economic strategies. And as we would see it, local economies everywhere should now be rejecting this idea that the sole measure of economic success is growth and should be including those additional metrics for well-being, happiness, the reduction of poverty and carbon emissions as part of this progressive and inclusive local economic strategy. And I know that many of you are on with that already. Second, it's really about growing what you have. We've been talking a lot about that today. The overwhelming majority of businesses in the UK are SMEs. So looking for opportunities to support and influence the behaviour of those businesses stood out as a key tactic, really, within our research. And so I think by rerouting everyday functions like procurement, what we've been talking about today, bringing it under the purview of economic development. We're seeing areas not only supporting their local economies to grow, supporting those local businesses to grow and develop, but it's also facilitating a shift towards the adoption of the real living wage, towards worker ownership, as well as those responses to climate and environmental breakdown. Third, it's about recognising that there's a range of pathways, of course, by which people can be enterprising and entrepreneurial. So diversifying business support, commissioning those social enterprise hubs, those cooperative development agencies, supporting socially trading organisations are really key methods of intervention to grow more generative local enterprise. So Liverpool City Region, Greater Manchester Combined Authority, North of the Tyne Combined Authority are all areas that are doing sterling work in this regard. Fourth, it's about harnessing the power of progressive employment. We've been talking about the ICANN model today here in the West Midlands. Local anchors, of course, have significant numbers of jobs with good terms and conditions that can really be targeted towards people and communities who need those jobs the most. And I suppose the research is really highlighting that the benefit of developing these local initiatives in conjunction with the local community to get them ready for work. And as I say, the ICANN programme that we've been talking about today is a great example of that. And finally, it's about collaboration through local governance arrangements. So we know that kind of networks of anchor institutions exist across the UK, really, in light of those numerous partnership arrangements that we have in place, like the Anchor Network here, of course, in Birmingham. So harnessing the power of public expenditure, employment initiatives, as well as the usage, disposal, and stewardship of public land are key interventions that can be driven, scaled, and amplified through these anchor networks. Now, I suppose just before I get some reflections, I know that it's one thing, right, for us to stand here and say, and declare that this is what local economies should be doing. And we know how challenging it is out there at the moment for you all as local authorities. But there's never perhaps been a more urgent time in our recent history, I think, to embrace this progressive agenda for change. And hopefully the kind of interventions that we're sketching out in this report should provide something of a blueprint and a beacon of hope for local economies everywhere as they attempt to build a better future. That's enough from me. I'm going to bring in the panel. I hope that they're there. Oh, I can see them. They are there. Brilliant. How are you all doing?
Good, thanks.
Good stuff. Brilliant. So we're going to take some reflections now from our virtual panel. I want 1 minute each, please, if you possibly can. Shana, I'm going to come to you first. I was over in Dublin just before the pandemic, talking to you and your colleagues about community wealth building, the challenges of getting this off the ground in Dublin. How are things today, and how is what I've said just there resonating with you?
First, thank you for inviting me. Secondly, just in case you haven't provided an introduction, I'm the CEO of a think tank in Dublin called TASK. We specialize in inequality. I was really interested in the report because I lived in the UK. I lived in Manchester for a long time, and so I was very happy to be invited. And I think one of the reasons is because at TASK, what we've done is integrate some of the principles of community wealth building with climate action. We've developed a model called the People's Transition, where we focus on what community priorities and concerns are, like jobs for young people, and we integrate it with what we call climate-led solutions, but we ground it in cooperatives and social enterprise like community wealth building in developing a strategy for climate action that's bottom-up versus top-down policy, which can alienate people from engaging in climate action. Anyway, I think I've done my minute, but I'm not. I think I've finished with the short introduction.
Andy, if I could turn to you, it'd be great to kind of to hear about what's going on in the Combined Authority in Manchester and get your reflections on that introduction there.
Yes, hi everybody. It's great to be able to contribute to this event today. I guess if I take the point, Tom, about the establishing the vision, I think that's really important. In some ways, we were a bit later to this than others. We did have a growth strategy very focused on inward investment, and people know how that changed the city of Manchester. But I guess it was our unhappy experienced through COVID, and some of you will have seen all of that as we went through that. That experience really kind of laid bare for us the map of areas with low wealth, low capacity, low resilience. And in the pandemic, we established an independent inequalities commission, chaired by Professor Kate Pickett and many other amazing people on it. And through that came the Good Lives for All vision, and starting to think differently about how do we give all of our residents good homes, good work, building health in all of our communities. And from that has come a bit of a sea change really here in terms of making change happen. You mentioned procurement, Tom. I mean, I would absolutely endorse that. And I think the social value framework is, we've got everything we need, but I don't think any of us really across the UK are using it properly. So we've kind of really dived into that. It's about having full social value weighting, isn't it, in public procurement? So full 20%. And what we've tried to do is link it to something very specific, because sometimes social value can be a bit, well, what is it? You know, it's a bit airy-fairy, or people don't quite know what it is and they can't really put their hands on it. We've linked public procurement to our Good Employment Charter, which is something that we've developed. So, for instance, we're going through the process right now of putting buses back under public control, and we're linking that process to the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter. And there, you know, that gives you some real grip, if you like, in terms of building community wealth and social value. So we're definitely getting better. Just to say something about the way in which we help give pathways for non-extractive or generative enterprise. We are on with building a community wealth hub, and we're glad that the document references this. But I think what we're doing is taking time to get it right, and actually provide simplified support rather than creating a social enterprise hub or a cooperative hub. We're just trying to create a single hub that kind of is almost sort of form blind and just helps communities find what's right for them. I also think it's really important that we don't almost tell communities where they should be building wealth, but actually where communities want to save an important local building or a pub or whatever it might be, that we've got a hub that can actually respond to the different calls that may come from our communities and not be too prescriptive. So we're just on with doing that at the moment, Tom. And yeah, I'll probably finish there because I'm sure you want to hear from everybody. Just to make a final point, perhaps, about you're saying that the times are tough, and they certainly are. And I think we're all feeling that, aren't we? It's been a really, really difficult year. But definitely there comes an opportunity, doesn't there, where I think there is a feeling of things can't stay like this. We need to think very differently about how we ensure all of our residents get the basics and can do it in a way where they're not being exploited from a paying for them point of view. And just one last thought, I think all of this means that we need to sort of think differently about the assets within our communities. Smaller community organisations, voluntary organisations, in many ways that grow what you've got thing. I would really say, cherish those things. Sometimes local government rushes straight to competitive tendering exercises that can sometimes favour the big charities or the big voluntary organisations. Actually, I think we need to come at it another way and network our smaller, our locally based organisations, treat them as equals, give them long-term core funding. And actually, they're the bedrock for building community wealth, because all kinds of people may come through those organisations, then go on to create other organisations, and the value multiplies. So I think it's partly about the public sector having a very different relationship with community and voluntary organisations at the very micro level, and starting to work with them as partners on a long-term basis. And I think community wealth comes from that.
Today from Jack at the Combined Authority about the Community Wealth Hub and the really good kind of community engagement you've been doing as part of that piece. So it's really exciting. Right. Sarah, if we could come to you next. Anyone with a keen eye will know that Sarah has actually been at the conference today, but it would have been a bit weird to just have her on her own on the stage. So we did something even weirder and put her in a little cubby hole. But Sarah, how's the cubby hole, and is it a similar story within Sydney?
The cubbyhole is a lovely large room, so yes, it's a very similar story in Sydney. And I think So for everyone in the audience, I'm the social strategy manager at the city. So I have a really broad remit in terms of I look at everything from our role in affordable housing through to our social programs, our social infrastructure, how we work with support communities. And as part of that, community wealth building and what an inclusive economy really looks like for us. Many of the things Andy's raised, similar in Sydney. We're on the other side of the world, often called the lucky country, but exactly the same challenges. So in 2019, as an example, just to give context, within our small LGA, because we're just the city and a bit like the City of London, so we're not for the great, I don't represent the greater Sydney area. 140 billion was generated in our LGA, which in context is 7% of the Australian economy, GDP. And yet we've actually, as a city, been tracking wellbeing and equality indicators over the last 10 years. We know and this is pre-COVID, so I suspect these stats are even worse now, but over 20% more people are on the lowest income within our LGA in comparison to the national average. And yet we also have over double the highest income earners living in our LGA. So real inequalities being experienced. Likewise, home ownership, half the national average, yet we have double the national average of individuals renting. And so for us, with the impacts of COVID as well, it really highlighted the challenges we are facing as an LGA and really bringing to the fore some of those groups that needed even more support from us and us having to step in a way we've never had to before, and really highlighting that whilst we have great wealth and prosperity in some respects, that's not there and not available for everyone, and really making us question about some of the work we do, how we can expand that work or think about it in a different way. And to Andy's point as well, we did a lot of work over the last year, 2 years, has really challenged us about our role. So being much more of a connector in the community and just enabling. So around food, for instance, food security and working with our Indigenous populations, actually going, no, we're not going to step in and do this. It's about providing the support, financial, connecting groups, providing skills to enable the community to actually have the capacity and ability to be able to do what they know they want to do, need to do, and really questioning really that grassroots up. So that's a little bit of perspective around Sydney and how things look like here or there. So.
Thanks so much, Sarah. That was great. Richard, if I could come to you next. I know there's a lot of thinking in Greater London around the idea of anchors. Some words from you, please.
Certainly. Hi, I'm Richard Watts. I'm the Mayor of London's Deputy Chief of Staff, which is a job I've done for the last 18-odd months. Before that, I was leader of Islington Council for 8 years, where we tried hard to lead some of the thinking around community wealth building and what that means for local government. The thing I really want to talk about, because let's try and leave as much time for questions and comment as possible, is the London Anchor Institutions Network, which was born out of the absolute despair of the pandemic and the incredibly unequal impact that had because of different people's ability to, their socioeconomic status meant that they could protect themselves more or less from the virus, but also that, the way in which that was devastating areas of our economy. And again, that was felt very unevenly across our very unequal city as well. In the context of London, we all know having enormous affluence, but also having enormous poverty and enormous inequality as well. And showing some kind of civic leadership and bringing together the biggest institutions in the city, whether that's organisations like Transport for London or the Metropolitan Police that have got a direct line of accountability to the mayor, but also using soft power to bring together the universities of London, other bits of our education sector, big companies like Thames Water and others to form this network of some of the biggest and most powerful employers in the city. And really use that network then to get actual change for ordinary Londoners on the ground. I strongly believe, and I think this goes to one of the ways in which we do government in this country are broken. because we talk a bit about what government should do and the outcomes it should get, and that's right. And your example about the prioritisation that, for example, inward investment gets, that's right, without ever asking who benefits from that and how. And in a city as unequal as London, or frankly many other bits of the UK as well, how do we make sure the benefits of get to people who actually need it? And I think that means that we fundamentally have to worry about how we do things as well as what we do. And in fact, that you cannot separate the ends and the means in public service. So we have worked with NHS London, for example, to move towards all of their staff and critically their contractors all earning the real London living wage. Because if we're serious about health and well-being, well, actually, paying people not poverty wages is a critical step towards making sure people have got the health and well-being that the NHS is there to provide. Or we worked towards the Metropolitan Police buying and procuring far more of what they do from small and particularly minority-owned businesses, because again, where we have a real challenge there of community confidence in the Met, well, actually seeing the Met as an economic player in their communities and someone who's benefiting them in their pockets will be a big part of the rebuilding of confidence job that we all know needs to happen. So, I think we're doing some quite innovative stuff. Anyone who wants to have a look at the London Anchor Institution's website is very welcome to come and have a look at it, and I'd be really interested to get people's thoughts about it. But it's, for me, it's that civic leadership role to change not just what we do, but how we do it that's so important.
Thank you. Dayna, last but not least, if I could come to you and get some reflections from a US perspective on all of this would be brilliant.
Thanks, and good afternoon, everybody. I want to start by framing the kind of inequality context in the US. So we are the wealthiest nation in world history, with $140 trillion in household wealth in the country. And 40% of the population is either low income or in poverty. And so this question of economic inclusion, of economic democracy, asks also another question, which is, in a democracy, an economic democracy, what is the role of economic citizenship? What is the role of citizenship that sees itself both in political and in economic terms? So I should start by saying that I'm the Dean of the Tisch College of Civic Life at Tufts University. So I'm interested, I'm focused on this question of citizenship from that perspective. Before this, I ran a development and planning lab at MIT. And so this wealth inequality is grounded in politics and grounded in a history in the US of slavery capitalism, which creates political influence of wealth in politics and degrades citizenship. So this is a critical question for us now. We don't use the term entrepreneurial urbanism. And I saw that in the report as sort of a ding against the traditional model. But I love the idea of what if we really could have true, deep entrepreneurial urbanism that was grounded in citizenship. So I want to talk a little bit just for a minute about the work that I have done in the US in marginalized communities, mainly in New York City. And it begins with training community members to recognize their role as economic actors, to do participatory planning with communities to come up with their own ideas about development trajectories, and to think about how they as citizens can discipline local markets to produce well-being. So they form infrastructure, organizations, and forums to discuss and debate what the trajectory of local development can be. And in the case of one of our projects, they built a community movement that began with a protest against a hospital closure, but ended with $1 billion of investment on the part of the governor of New York in local health and well-being initiatives, including local entrepreneurship. So I would love to talk more about that. Maybe somebody will ask me questions about it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dana. That was great. Yeah, I am gonna bring in the audience just in a moment. But if I could just maybe kind of dig into some of the points that were raised there. I think, you know, one of the things that we've reflected in our report, I suppose, is that there is still this belief that we can deliver through inward investment type strategies. And Andy, you mentioned the kind of the good employment charter that you've got there in Greater Manchester. Richard, you were talking about how we need to we can squeeze investors more. So I was wondering if we could dig into that. But Shana, maybe I could start with you on that. I mean, I don't know what your perspective is on Dublin. Whether, you know, there's awful lot of foreign direct investment gone on in Dublin. You know, is there more that we can do? You know, it is to a large extent still a reality. We are going to have to use these strategies to grow and develop our economy in the absence of kind of more funding and support, I think. So do you feel like there's more that we can do with inward investment as a strategy to really connect that to people and communities, or are we kind of onto a hiding to nothing still with that?
I think the other side of that you emphasize a lot in the report is how do you measure progress? So if progress is economic growth, which the Irish government is really attached to, that's its whole sort of industrial policy, is to attract foreign investment through a low corporate tax rate. The problem is that the domestic economy, indigenous businesses have been left behind, and you can see it in areas of Dublin. I don't know how familiar you are, like North Dublin, there's high levels of deprivation. And so I think it's not just the investment aspect of it, it's how do you measure what progress you want. And what we found in the project I was talking about, the People's Transition, we've gone into sort of areas of Dublin with high levels of deprivation and along the border with Northern Ireland, where there's also some of the highest rates of poverty and the least access to public services in the country. And they don't want foreign investment. They want what you would call inward investment, but they want it grounded. They want they want decisions. They want to make their own decisions about how the money is spent and where it's spent. We've oriented toward climate change because it's the great existential challenge of our time, but also because Ireland's performing really badly on its carbon emissions for EU standards. But the point is that I don't think you can think just about investment. You have to think about what exactly do you want with that money, and what does the community want? Who is the community? Because I think you just can't assume who makes up the community. And then what do they want to do with the money? One example, and I'll finish here, is that we have a project in Ardra and Donegal, and they were approached by a seaweed farm, which is a growing business, to develop a farm there. And they're like, no, because if you come in here and you invest, you're going to take 70% of the income away from here. We don't want that. So we'll come up with our own climate-led project like geothermal energy, but not seaweed farming unless we own the majority of it, because we want to be more in control of our resources and our own future.
Yeah, that's great. And I suppose, Andy, if I could come to you, can we use that good employment charter in Greater Manchester to be as targeted as we need to be, do you think? Can we really make that kind of deliver the impact in the communities that we need it to deliver those impacts?
Yeah, I think so, Tom. I mean, I'm so glad we've got it. If we didn't have it right now and we were having to invent it, I think we'd be missing out on a lot. I think coming out of the pandemic, it gave us a real kind of clear template for people to say to people, this is what we're about. And if you're not about this, then you go, honestly, I'm that blunt sometimes with people, genuinely go somewhere else. And we're putting teeth behind it now because we're beginning to get complaints against it, and we're dealing with them very rigorously. So actually, I think it is creating some real purchase on the system. And I mentioned buses. Well, it's definitely had that impact there, but beginning to have more impact across the board. And we're just talking now about how do we promote our accredited good employers. And the thing about it is it's not targeted in what it's asking of people. Of course, it's asking people to raise their game across the sort of range of employment. It is pay, but it's also security, and it's gender pay gap, and it's workplace voice. It's kind of asking people to kind of almost change as an organisation to a degree in terms of the way organisations relate to workforce. And I was at an event the other day, which was really interesting. in relation to pay. And one of our employers there was saying, what it does is it just makes boardrooms have different conversations to say, well, actually, if we're going to pay, when people say, well, how are we going to pay for all of this? It's starting to change their behavior in the boardroom, saying, well, obviously, the benefits that we can see are coming to our organization through productivity or retaining staff or whatever it might be. We want to keep those. And if we're going to have to find a way of paying for them, well, it's about maybe reducing pay and benefits at the top of the organization. But that itself builds a cohesion and it brings a value, doesn't it, in terms of local communities. So for us, I can only see this process continuing, and I would like to see all public procurement in Greater Manchester linked to the Good Employment Charter. And actually, we're in conversation with the government at the moment about a new devolution deal for Greater Manchester, where we're looking to see if we can have more influence over DWP spending, skills, you name it, And so I kind of feel this is a bottom-up sort of vehicle for changing things in a way that Whitehall could never get near to with employment legislation. This is something that's kind of more meaningful, I would say, Tom. I'm not going to say it's the be-all and end-all. I'm sure it could be improved. I know other areas have got their own version of this. But I think the fact that it is so tangible and clear, and we're not just asking people to sort of tick boxes in a very sort of vague way about social value, I just think it's starting to have that, it's starting to drive the system in a way that I think is beyond what we thought it would at the start.
Can we take a couple of questions from the floor? Yeah, we've got a gentleman over there. Let's take, have we got any more? Maybe we'll take 3 questions, and then we've got a gentleman here, and then anyone else, and then the lady down the front. So, right, I'm going to give this throwable microphone a really good test. Helen, have we got the platinum insurance deal, yeah? Oh, managed it.
Wow. Okay, this is the future. Okay, yeah, I've got a question for Richard. My name's Sam. I'm a councillor from Hackney. It's great to hear what's happening around anchor institutions and all the work that is happening. My question is about ownership and how we kind of promote ownership on a pan-London kind of level. In your old pasture of Islington, they've created a cooperative development vehicle. I was just wondering, are there any considerations of doing that on a kind of pan-London level? And what can the GLA kind of do with the funds that it's got to influence different ownership models in London? Thank you.
You in, Richard. That's just, if you could just chuck it over to, was it the gentleman here? Yeah, here we go. Yeah. Okay, we'll take the 3 questions, and then we'll. Was it you?
Let's get on the way. While it's no, where are you? Who wants this? Oh, it's there.
My question was about inclusive growth, about the importance of involving marginalised and racialised communities as part of the debates, because generally they tend to be excluded, which means that the inclusive growth really isn't inclusive as far as those communities are concerned.
And then we're going to go over here. Oh, we've
Tallulah from the Chartered Institute of Building, but my question is actually from a personal perspective. It seems that fundamental to the community wealth building model is the role of local government, and I just wondered, is part of that building politically active citizens, and how do we really harness the power of and belief in local government? I come from Salford, the 18th most deprived constituency in England, and the turnout in local elections is significantly below the national average, it's about 19%. So to truly deliver community wealth building, how do you actually get people to have a stake in their local political context?
Thanks so much. If we could take, Richard, if you want to take the point about London.
So the question was about co-ops and the importance of ownership. I think this really matters, and I think in truth I have in the past made the mistake of underestimating how much ownership matters, because if we're going to avoid that sense of kind of extractive wealth built, extractive investment, then actually the people who own the stuff really does matter. So at the GLA we are working on a cooperative development thing, and we're working with a number of boroughs. Greenwich have got a very long history of this, but it's great. I'm very pleased Islington to do it, and some other forward-thinking boroughs as well. It'd be great to work with Hackney on it. But we're going to get a cooperative development bit of our website, and we're going to work with other cooperative development people to do it. In truth, I think there's an interesting question in an area like London, where you've got 33 different borough councils, as well as the GLA and the mayor, and then a whole range of other institutions, about how we can really get that sense of ownership going down into communities and how we can draw it. So I think there's some more work we can do on this, though.
Great, thanks. Right, I'm going to, last minute, I'm going to combine these last two questions together, I think. It's kind of like, how do we not marginalise people? How do we make this bottom up? Dayna, if I could maybe come to you on that final question, just 1 minute, please.
Sure, yeah. It begins with specific engagement with communities around their learning about their needs and their local context. And that's why I'm a huge proponent of participatory action research, where communities define the questions and then work towards the solution. And there's no way to impose that from the top. It has to come from the bottom up.
Thanks so much.
And I should say universities are critical partners in that.
Brilliant. Well, listen, can we give our panel a big thank you before I send them off back into the virtual universe? Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for joining in. Brilliant. And Sarah, I'm gonna hand over you for the final last few words.
Great, thank you, Tom, and thanks to our fantastic panel. It was really interesting to hear those perspectives from different parts of the world, and hearing just the ambition for community wealth building in not only in different parts of the world, but at different scales as well. And I think that's one of the interesting things about where we are now with community wealth building. You know, how do you start to achieve change at scale? So it's now time, sadly, to bring our summit to a close. It always feels that it just goes so fast, doesn't it? You know, 1 minute I'm just standing up here talking to, in the next minute we're in the process of saying goodbye. But it's been absolutely brilliant. I've enjoyed every moment of it, and I hope you all have as well. And I just have a few thank yous really before I let you go and get your trains and whatever other modes of transport you've used to get here today. I want to first of all thank all our speakers. Some of you are here in the room still with us. Thank you so much for coming and sharing and being here in person and online, and telling us about your journey of community wealth building. I want to thank our partners, Birmingham City Council, Barrow Cadbury, the Democracy Collaborative, and Power to Change. And without your support, we couldn't make today happen. But I also want to thank all of you for coming today, and for sharing your experiences, for asking us really interesting, challenging questions, and just being here in person and having the chance to meet us and to meet each other. And I hope that's been really useful and inspirational for you as well. And finally, I just want to thank the CLES team. They've done an amazing job, I think you'll agree, in organising what's been a brilliant day. And I particularly want to thank Helen at the back there, who has done so much to make today possible, and also to Lisa and to Victoria, the three of them have done a huge job in pulling together what has been a really ambitious programme. But beyond that, the whole team, every single member of the CLES team has done something today to support and build this event. So I just want to really pay tribute to them as well. Before I let you go, I just want to say as well, please keep in touch. If you've had an interesting conversation with someone, a CLES member staff or someone else from another organisation, keep in touch. Let's continue to build the movement. Let's continue to grow and work together towards a better economic future. And it's been a privilege to be able to meet many of you today, and I'm really looking forward to the next summit next year. And I'm sure we'll see many of you again then as well. So safe journey home. Thanks a lot. Please keep in touch, and good luck with it all. Thank you.